What is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 3 Part 1 of What If Deku Had Venom. It had only been a couple days since the passing of the symbol of peace, but the effects of his death were showing. Crime rates had risen up dramatically ever since the news was brought out about All Might's death. Those who had known All Might personally had mourned his death the most. All Might was more than just the number one hero to them. He was a friend. He was their teacher. He was their support system. Someone who they could always fall back on when they were going through rough times. Even Aizawa shed a couple tears at his funeral. Something uncharacteristic of the stoic teacher. He never liked to admit it, but he did. At the very least, respect All Might for his heroic nature. He was a buffoon for the longest he'd known the man, but it was a strangely charming characteristic of the man. Despite all his faults, he would never falter and try his darndest to look out for others. He gripped his fists tight. He'd lost another one. He'd let another one die. He cursed himself. All Might knew. Yaga's death provided painful memories to Aizawa. It reminded him of his late friend who didn't even get a chance to get that far before he tragically died protecting others. Aizawa and the whole of Class 1A left after a good couple of hours of grieving their loss. It hurt Izuku even more than the others here. He'd seen what had happened back there. All for One used a symbiote that looked rather unique to the rest in order to get the upper hand on All Might, which really pushed All Might to the upper extents of his limit. He felt terrible because a symbiote was the reason why he was even able to get this far in the first place. He knew Venom was different though. It wasn't Venom's fault at all here. But he couldn't help but feel bad just because of association. It almost felt like he killed his number one idol. More time passed by and UA decided to change the way their school operated in order to provide more protection to their students. The principal decided to turn the school into a boarding school. This came as a shock to many of the students. Some of the parents of the students were against the idea of their kids still attending the high school though. Inko Midoriya was one of them, especially after the revelation Izuku had seemingly lost his quirk somehow while he was held captive by the League of Villains. The principal of UA and Aizawa were practically pleading with Inko at this point to allow her son to continue to study at UA. Inko was about to force the two out of her apartment when they heard a knock at the door. Inko was confused when she heard this and looked through the peephole to see who it was that was knocking. She became even more confused when she found that it was the police at the door. She opened the door and invited the officers into her humble abode. What could I do for you, kind officers?" Inko asked. Sakachi was among the police here and shook his head at Inko. "It's not what you could do for us, but more what we could offer for each other." Inko, Aizawa, Netsu, and Izuku all looked at the detective in confusion. Sakachi sighed. He then looked at Izuku. "Midoriya Izuku. A couple of our police officers went to investigate the League of Villains labs where they seemingly produced the Namo. We were hoping to find anything to help us figure out how they are produced and what we could do in order to stop them. But we ended up finding something else entirely." Izuku was still confused. What did any of this have to do with him specifically? Wait, they mentioned labs though. Were they trying to imply what he was thinking? It looks like you're starting to get it. Well, I've got a question for you, Midoriya Izuku. Would you like to regain your quirk? Izuku sputtered hearing this. What do you mean? Well, this is where I'm going to have to ask you to come with us. The rest of this information is highly classified and highly important towards your future, especially with your connection to the League of Villains and All Might. Izuku didn't know what to say here. His mother tried to protest this, but Izuku realized he had to stand up for himself here and make his own decisions. He turned to face his mother and grabbed her hands. He looked her in the eyes with a deadly intense stare. He then spoke. "Mom, I've been through a lot these past couple of months. You and I both know this. I know you want me to be safe. But if I don't try to put my foot down now, especially with what's going on in Japan right now, it will be impossible to predict what will happen in the future. I don't want to live with the fact that I could have made a change but just sat back and allowed Japan to continue to corrupt with villain activity." Inko didn't know how to respond here. She'd never seen her son so serious before. This was the first time he'd ever had such an intensity in his eyes. It was at this moment she realized that this wasn't her baby boy anymore. Izuku had grown up and no longer needed her protection. It was time for her to let go and allow him to make his own decisions. She sighed. "Go." Once Inko gave the affirmative, Izuku left with Detective Sakachi and the other police officers in order to recover what he had lost. While this was going on though, the League of Villains were working to avoid the news outlets. Ever since the Camino Ward raid, they had been in a pretty bad position. Not only did they lose their hideout and their lab full of almost all of their research, but they also lost All for One. It made Shigaraki scream internally when he realized all of this. But at least one good thing came out of it. There was more chaos on the streets, so it was easier for them to be able to stay out of the limelight. Shigaraki could tell what was happening now. Society was crumbling. He could practically hear the foundations that All Might built up over the years crumble. He honestly felt like laughing a little. All that work All Might put in to create the perfect society was now being torn down. He could only imagine the guy rolling around in his grave. He practically cheered when he found out the hero died. He counted his losses and would improve from there on, especially now that Sensei wasn't there to guide him anymore. He had to grow by himself and his partners in crime from now on. He heard something about this Yakuza group who were emerging from the shadows though. Something was happening with their group that made them an incredible threat to society right now, and Shigaraki was intrigued. He already wanted to have a meeting with them. But rather than jump to approaching them this time around, he chose to be patient for once. He had a feeling they would come to him, and sure enough they did. Jiren informed him about how the leader of the Yakuza apparently wanted to have a meeting with him. He was intrigued hearing this honestly. He had twice been the one to go bring the leader of the Shy Hasekai over to their temporary hideout. He made sure that the other league members were there with him as well in case things didn't go so well in their interaction. Appearance-wise, he didn't know what he should have expected. But it was certainly nothing like what he ended up encountering. Before we get back into the video, let's hear a word from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Comax Customs, a brand new clothing line made for the wearer. Comax Customs puts the customer first, offering a variety of clothing options ranging from casual to business casual. If you're looking for comfortable, easy-fitting clothing at low prices, check out Comax Customs today. A man who looked to be within his mid to late 20s walked into his hideout alongside Twice. Twice introduced the two to each other, and Shigaraki was surprised to say the least. Man, this place is a dump. Even the quality of the villains here is unimpressive. Only mildly impressive one here is the musclehead over on the side. Shigaraki was growing more and more frustrated as the moments went by with this man belittling him. It took everything out of him to not just lash out at this guy right now. Who does this guy think he is? Magni was in outrage at hearing Overhaul's cruel words. But before they could do anything about it, Shigaraki stopped her by raising his hand toward them. They froze. Seems like they at least know that you're the top dog around here. Yeah, this guy. His mannerisms are just so different from everyone else's, Himiko commented. Mr. Compress turned to her and explained to her the history behind Overhaul and the Shy Hasekai. The reason why they were so different. How they were a powerful organization from way back in the day. Ever since All Might came into the picture, they had become one of the last surviving species from a long-gone era that were struggling to survive. You know your history, Houdini. I commend you for that at the very least, and as for your leader here, I would like to inform him that the Yakuza will make a comeback. How, you may ask? Well, ever since All for One's defeat by the hands of All Might, the role of the rulers of not only the darkness but also the light are currently vacant. It's up for grabs. Now, the question is who will fill the role for the darkness? Isn't it obvious? Me, of course. Oh. And how do you plan on going about it? Shigaraki was confused by Overhaul's question. What was this guy getting at? Judging by your silence, it seems that you don't have one. You didn't think this through, did you? Pathetic. But I suppose it makes sense considering all that has happened with you losing two valuable first-class pawns during this time. It's a miracle you didn't lose all of them already. Shigaraki was this close to lashing out at the man, but he tried to calm himself down. All this guy was doing was spewing words out his mouth. He could take that. It's not like he was an immediate threat. Yeah, he just wanted to get underneath Shigaraki's skin. But he wouldn't allow it. No way. He needed to show that he was indeed capable. Overhaul sighed while giving all his attention to Shigaraki. I'm quite disappointed in the League of Villains. Honestly, I didn't request to meet with you in order to join your group. Instead, I want to have things go the other way around. It would be of the League's best interest to join the Shy Hasekai under the control of a real leader who knows how to handle the power given to him. Join the next ruler of the darkness. The whole room was silent after Overhaul's monologue. The tension in the room was so thick it was suffocating. No one dared to say a word. It felt like an eternity passed before Shigaraki opened up his mouth. Leave. That was when Pandora's box was opened. Magni charged at Overhaul. She yelled at him and explained how the League would bow to no one, especially not to the likes of Overhaul's group. She used her quirk to force Overhaul to her and tried to hit him over the head with her weapon. But something happened. Something that caused Shigaraki to lose his cool at this very moment. Overhaul slipped off one of his gloves and had a finger touch her. That was it. That was all that was required for Magni to explode to bits and pieces before everyone's very eyes. How disgusting. To be fair though, he did throw the first punch. Mr. Compress was the next to charge in, but he tried to capture Overhaul using his quirk. As soon as Overhaul felt Compress's hand touch his arm, his eyes narrowed in disgust. Suddenly, Mr. Compress was shot and Overhaul blew up the man's left arm. It was then the League realized that Overhaul didn't come alone here. Tamura was beyond furious now. Carnage completely enveloped him as before he was just hiding in plain sight as his trench coat. Tamura had tried to stay calm throughout this whole interaction. But now Overhaul had gone too far. He killed one of his teammates and greatly wounded another. This was an unforgivable action on Overhaul's part. He charged at the Plague Doctor cosplayer. Overhaul ordered for a shield to block Shigaraki's upcoming attack. Sure enough, one did arrive, but Shigaraki went right through it and didn't slow down at all. A bullet was sent at Shigaraki, but he swatted it away. He clawed at Overhaul's chest, which left deep wounds there. Overhaul was bleeding profusely here. He looked at Shigaraki's new state in fear. He had heard nothing about this before and wondered just what this vile creature was before him. It looked like it came from the lower depths of hell if you asked him. Overhaul's subordinates finally showed themselves and stood in front of Overhaul in his injured state. Shigaraki tusked when he saw them. You know, things would have been far easier if you showed yourselves from the start. I guess I'm going to have to slaughter all of you. Overhaul quickly used his quirk on himself and reformed himself back into his uninjured state, although he groaned at the pain he felt from using this technique. He looked back to Shigaraki, although now he was more hesitant at approaching him. He knew nothing about what Shigaraki had transformed into and didn't know what he was capable of in this form. He kept his distance, but tried to defuse the situation. Look, it's a casualty on both sides. I killed one of your men. You killed one of mine. I think it would be wise on both sides to end the meeting here for now. Feel free to talk to us once you've calmed down, and maybe next time you can tell me more about this form of yours, Shigaraki. Shigaraki watched as Overhaul and his goons left the premises. Himiko, Twice, and Muscular all wanted to kill Overhaul for his actions here, but Shigaraki ordered them all to stand down. He looked down at his feet to notice that Overhaul left behind a business card of the sorts that revealed where the Yakuzas were apparently located. Carnage retreated from Shigaraki's body and formed back into the trench coat. He picked up the business card and tucked it in his pocket for safekeepings. He made another mistake here, but he would learn from it. He always did. The scene faded to black. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer for this video, as well as the editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out mortals. Have an amazing day.